a passionate instigator and dynamic problem solver. Dr. Kevin Ross Emery, the host of the Dr. Kevin Radio Show, will be taking you outside the box, behind the curtain, and identifying the load of BS we are fed every day. And now, Dr. Kevin.
Hello, 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 and welcome to the Dr. Kevin Show here on Om Time. And this is got that combination of a sweet and a sadness and all sorts of emotions. For this is the last Dr. Kevin Show on Om Time, and I have resurrected from the archives none other than the Reverend Lorri Powers-Otto, who her and I are gonna kind of fill you in and take this show out. Before we do that, and before I welcome Lorri, I want to start by thanking everybody at my Om Times family. I think I've been here 7 years now. I'm not even sure. Time just kind of goes. And I want to thank them for all their support, all their, promotions, all their everything. If you are somebody who is feeling like your radio is calling to you and that this is the medium for you, then make sure that you reach out to Chris at Om Times and let him know, because they are certainly, will set you up and treat you right. So I want to start with that and put it out there that even though I'm kind of yet again shifting and moving, that I'm so grateful for the time that I've had here on Om Times. And now I want to welcome back a voice from the past. Ms. Lorri, are you there?
I am here, Dr. Kevin. Oh, it's good to be back, and thank you for letting me be here for this bittersweet, your last show on Om Times. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a great honor.
Honor. There's nobody that's more perfect in this send-off than you are. Excuse me. So I just, and I'm kind of sort of turning the show over to you first of all, I want to check in before you start kind of interviewing me as kind of like what's going on and what's happening, because I'm sure I've got some listeners out there going, what?
Yeah.
But before that, you had some personal stuff going on. You needed to back away. That was several months ago, though you and I stay in touch, as we will always stay in touch. Hell, you can't even die and get rid of me because I'll just, do mediumship and vice versa. So we're stuck with each other.
Yeah.
I figure when we're both dead and gone, then we'll move on into new soul lives, and then we'll figure out, we'll find each other in that next lifetime, right?
The way it happens. That's right. Can't get rid of me.
Well, right back at you. You can't get rid of me either. So,
yeah.
So we're even. But anyways, do you want to share a little bit about what's going on with you and where are you these days? Is there any exciting news or anything? Because I know my listeners would want to know.
Yeah, with everything going on, I've gotten my health back, so that's a big thing. But the only exciting thing I really have is I will be releasing my third book on February 18th, and it is called God Is Not What You Think.
Nice. Well, we will definitely be doing in some future incarnation of me on the radio, have you on talking all about that. I'm looking forward for it coming out. Remind the listeners of your first two books.
One is We Can Save Her, Mother Earth, Climate Change, and Us, which isn't just about climate change. It is about our relationship with ourselves, each other, and the planet. And my second book, and it always amazes me that people think they're so very different, but they aren't. And it's called It's the Little Things, 200 plus ways to save money. And it is actually 227 easy ways that everybody can save money. And if people just implement just a handful of them, they will be astounded at how much money they can save. And I cover everything from groceries to travel to pets to kids to cars. I mean, the whole gamut. So those are my books. And of course, they're on Amazon. Because everything's on Amazon. But this show is not about me. This show is about you. And I want to talk about you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Wow. I would say that I was born ready, but who knows? Wasn't like I was there.
Yeah, well.
I mean, I guess some part of me was there, but
Exactly.
Oh, only a little of me slipped through at the beginning, because, that's the boring part. I mean, like, how exciting is it to crawl out of the cave and go, shit, I'm back here again? No.
For some of us, that was exactly the response. But no, like you said earlier, you've been on Home Times, you think 7 years-ish, right? But you've been doing radio and podcasting for a very long time, haven't you?
Yeah. So, it's funny because I've been saying for the last few years, I've been on air for 15 years and then it was 16 years. But, the funny thing is when it came time for me to do kind of a fold in and a reemergence, which is what's happening, that I went back to actually look back to my oldest archives to see exactly when did I start. And what I discovered was I actually started in 2004.
Wow.
So I've actually been on some form of being on air for 20 years. And I had said once a few years back, I'm like, I love my radio show, but I also, I've had a lot of different kinds of shows, and that, but it would be great to, make sure I get it to 20 years, like somehow that was some magic number. And I just realized it's been 20 years.
Well, you accomplished your goal. You got that going, right?
Yeah. Though, I do want to make it, known to my listeners, I am going to be taking a hiatus, and I'm going to do something that I've done off and on through the whole 20 years, which is I change format. I change the way I changed the title of the show. The show's had several different titles through the years. And I've had several different co-hosts through the years and, several different, so there's always a time where you have to withdraw, recreate, reimagine, and come back out in hopefully what will be a new and improved version of yourself. But yeah, I looked back and found it was 20 years ago, and my first thing was through a company called Yactivate, which I don't even think exists anymore. But yeah, so there is that. I actually finally did the research instead of pulling numbers out of my head or some other bodily part.
There's somewhere. But what I love about this is you had a dream, you followed it, but you weren't afraid to shake it up, because we both know people who are stuck in ruts doing what they love but now hate because they're afraid to take that step back or to reformat or to, improve it in some way. But I'm really curious to know what got you started on this path. I mean, what made you say, this is where I want to go?
So, blame it on Dolly. Blame it on Dolly Parton.
Okay.
I mean, if you're going to have to blame it on somebody, I mean, Dolly's as good as anyone. I mean, who doesn't love Dolly, right? So, literally, what made me fall in love with the idea to have a radio show before I ever had a radio show was watching a movie called Straight Talk. Do you, by any chance, do you remember that movie?
Sounds awfully familiar. I must have seen it because I'm pretty sure I have, but I'm not placing it right now.
So Straight Talk, which I love, I still watch it every now and then, every few years I'll haul it out and watch it. It's with Dolly Parton and James Wood. And it's a very simple premise. This down on her luck Southern dance instructor who's in just kind of an unhealthy, not like big time abusive, but just not a good, healthy relationship. And she finally is tired of this guy that she was living with using her. And she decides to move out, to pack her stuff. And she's a dance instructor in a small Southern town. And she goes to LA and she goes to apply to see if she can get a job as a receptionist at a radio station, and they mistake her for a radio psychologist who is coming in to do a new show. And the radio psychologist was supposed to come in, changed her mind, and just blew them off and never told them. And she walks in, and they stick her in front of a radio mic, thinking that she's the person.
I love it.
And so, the whole thing is part of the premise is one of the things that she keeps on getting in trouble as a dance teacher is she is giving advice to all these guys she's teaching how to dance. She's, you see her at the beginning, she's like, oh, don't feel that way about yourself. And you got a lot to offer. And if she can't see it, well, it's her loss. And, and she lifted all the spirits, but her boss was like, let's talk and more, stuff like this. But her dance clients loved her. So when she goes on here and it's a live call-in show, she starts giving good old-fashioned common sense answers.
I love it.
And, and then eventually it comes out and, that she's not really a radio psychologist, but everybody loves her. And, and so it's this great movie. It's a feel-good movie. But out of that movie came, the first time I ever heard it, this woman calls in and goes, is just going on and on. And she's going, my husband is mean to me and my children are mean to me and nobody listens to me. And she's like, ah. And Dolly's like, honey, get off the cross. We need the wood.
Yes, I remember.
And, so she's doing this good old, like, earthy kind of common sense. And I was like, and she takes on this radio psychologist on a panel who uses all these highfalutin words and all of this stuff. And she basically tells him where to stick it. Because, she's never been trained. And
right.
So that's what made me want to have a radio show. I wanted to have a radio show to just friggin' give people good advice and common sense. Like, there's so many people out there that are not really calling it as they see it. The funny thing is, in 20 years, I've never had that format for the radio show, but that was my that was the first thought of what I wanted my radio show to be.
Well, what types of shows did you have? I mean, we all know this one, but what else did you have?
So the first one, my first round of shows, and it stayed outside the box. It was actually outside the box with Dr. Kevin and Dara Jane. And Dara Jane was, you've heard me talk about her through the years. I called her my spiritual wife. She was my first spiritual business partner. We used to tease that she was Sister Mary Jane because she was raised Catholic. And we would just talk about, we did the show together because I didn't have the ability. I could have people email me questions, but the first place I started didn't have the ability to have call-ins. And so we would talk about things going on in the world and try to take people outside the box and give them a different perspective. And that first show, which lasted for a couple of years, I would be the outrageous one and Dara Jane would be the voice of reason. And I would get all upset by some shenanigan that some church pulled, doing really un-Christian-like things. And I'd go at Christians and she's like, now stop. You can't say that. You're making all the Christians sound the same. You know better than. And she'd get right back in my face on me. And we'd go back and forth. But it was always in a semi-funny, but loving, but really powerful way. And that was the kickoff. And I fell in love with having a radio show. And that was, like I said, it started in 2004.
Nice. And obviously, you have done TV, because I hosted with you for a year and a half. But
yeah,
you've done multiple TV shows.
Yeah. So, I started with Yactivate, and then I was on Voice America for a while. And I was on another station, and I don't remember what that station was. And then I was on CBS Radio. And I was on CBS Radio for a while, but by that point, Dara Jane had kind of gone in and out. And so the format changed a little bit, and then she would show up sometime, but she didn't quite, she always loved having us, she always loved it when we did a show together, but she didn't want to commit to doing a weekly show.
I can understand.
Yep. And just before CBS Radio, and I'm trying to remember who I was on with at that point, because I was on with another group that brought me in because I didn't want to renew my contract. I was unhappy with my producers, and I didn't want to renew a contract. But it was before CBS Radio. But there was a period where I did 5 shows a week.
Ah.
Had I ever shared that with you?
No, I didn't know that.
Yep. I did about a year of 5 shows a week. And I don't know if I can remember, because every show had a different title. So I'm trying to remember, because this has to be 15 years ago, at least. And I know that my Monday was like Outside the Box. My Tuesday, I think, was my Planetary Influences. And I know that Friday, and then Through the Spiritual Lens was Wednesday, and I can't remember what Thursday was. And then Friday was when I first created the whole concept of, you know how in the Dr. Kevin show we had the 3 segments, and the first segment was Outside of the Box, and then Behind the Curtain was Thursday, and then my Friday show was What a Load of Crap. So I had a weekly show that was What a Load of Crap, a weekly show that was Behind, so they were all under the Dr. Kevin auspice, but they had their unique themes for each of the shows.
Right. Oh, that's a lot of work. I don't think people understand how much work it is to do a radio show, but to do it 5 days a week, that is an insane amount of work.
Yeah. And at that point, I only was doing, I cut it back so it was a half an hour show, but that's still a lot. I definitely burned out on that, but it was doing the 5 days a week that somehow crossed me up to get on to CBS Radio. Like they did not, so I was doing CBS, but if I was going to go on CBS Radio, I needed to not be doing the other 4 days a week somewhere else. That was part of their contract with me. So that's why it ended. But CBS Radio was too good because it gave me a coast-to-coast audience.
Right. Well, now how did you get from CBS Radio to Own Times?
So I had a contractual dispute with CBS Radio. They offered me a renewal, but they wanted to change my time slot, and they also wanted to put some limitations on my content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
not good.
I mean, like, they were all set. I mean, like, when I went in and said, I'm not signing this contract, I went on, and technically, because we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I think that they thought I was going to give in, and they made a couple of adjustments, but their content issue. There was a content issue. And I just went in and I just live on air said, okay, my contract is up with CBS Radio. I'm done. Follow me here. I moved it into a podcast for a while. And I said, and I'm done. And thank you, CBS Radio, but I'm done. And that's how CBS Radio found out. Because they literally had a contract, but I told them I wouldn't sign it if they changed it. And they kind of played chicken with me on it. And I said, I'm done. And the real thing was, this was back, I don't know if you remember it, and part of it was about I was being too controversial, and they weren't promoting controversial radio shows at that point. I mean, you always had your shock jocks, and you always had some people, but some stations rolled that way and some didn't. And I was never a shock jock, but I was very controversial.
Right. And that still is a sad question on radio or TV and TV when they're afraid of the controversial, when they, kowtow to the, it has to be this way and you can't say or do this or that. Oh, that makes me crazy. It's good for you.
Well, they had, the reason that they were willing to keep me but move my spot was I was in a more primetime spot, and a couple of the sponsors for the radio show complained about me. And one of the big complaints was I was going at the state of Texas. Because they had, this is when that controversy first broke. And I don't know why, how the state of Texas or what in Texas or what the actual Texas connection was, because it was never explained to me, but that somehow there was complaints because I was telling the kids who were getting the new Houghton Mifflin created by Texas books that basically was historically incorrect for history books.
Oh, yeah.
That was how Texas wanted to tell the history. And this was like the first state that did that. And they were getting away with it.
Still do.
And I called them out. Yep, they still do. I still think that it should be illegal. But every show, I would do a little piece of how the kids that graduate should go back and sue Texas. And that they should be a class action suit. And I said that they should, and I was like, you should bankrupt Texas for this. They have messed with your education. They're not giving you correct information. You could do a class action suit. I even had talked to a lawyer who said, well, yeah, technically they could do a class action suit if there was, like blah, blah, blah. And I was on a soapbox. In fact, the radio station had the sound of a soapbox, of this like creaking sound, which was me. They were like, there goes Dr. Kevin. He's back on his soapbox. I know it's hard to believe, Lorri.
I'm sure. I can't imagine. But I mean, yeah. They
said we can move you to a later slot, but the sponsors that we have for that slot, that like were the regular advertiser sponsors for the slot or whatever, said I had to stop going after Texas. But I was like, it's not going to happen.
Well, that's not censorship.
Not going to happen.
Well, you moved on. Thank you.
I moved on.
And you're still here.
I'm still here. And I did a brief for a year or so where I got together with this guy who had all of this new technology. And he met me because I was teaching at an MBA level boot camp for entrepreneurs, and he was one of my entrepreneurs. And he offered to set me up with my own radio station on an internet platform. And I tried doing a station for a year that had like 7 or 8 shows of different people's shows.
Right.
And I was always trying to bring in new hosts. I was trying to do kind of what Om Times did, but I was also trying to run my practice. I was trying to do it all by myself. I was also teaching. And I mean, I had some really great shows. I had some great people that were there and doing shows on the station. It was DKRN, Dr. Kevin Radio Network.
Love it.
And that was the platform. And I can't remember, I think I had 7 or 8 other co-hosts, and I was trying to expand it, but I couldn't do it all.
Right.
I just literally reached a boundary where I couldn't do it all. And the guy with the technology connected with Chris here at Om Times, and I let DKRN go, and I came on to Om Times. And, you know, like I said at the beginning of the show, I thank them for, you know, like all of the support. And, you know, I have missed my share of shows in the last, especially 12 or 18 months, as I was also dealing with some health issues, and just had times where I was just like, I wasn't able to keep everything. I couldn't keep all the balls in the air, and they were always very understanding and very kind about it.
Nice. Nice.
So, yeah, so that's how it started. But it started with a little company called The Activate, offering me my own show.
Nice.
And me and Miss Dara Jane duking it out over everything and anything in the sun. I mean, we agreed on a lot, but, you know, and yeah, but I never got my straight talk show. I never got my call-in for advice show.
Well, you know, there's still time. But I mean, you've been on air for 20 years. You have got to have some amazing interviews or stories or people that you've come to know or had on air. Tell me some of those. I mean,
well, yeah. So, I mean, you had mentioned before, because I had Web of Light, where you co-hosted with me for, was it a year and a half of the 3 years? 2 years of the 3 years? Maybe a year and a half of the 3 years. Because I had Web of Light. Yep. And that was a TV show, which by the end of it was coast to coast. Through the not public service network. Help me here, Lorri. Through the
Hudson Public Television.
Yeah, public television. But I worked it, so I had public television stations from Maine to California who carried Web of Light. So, you know, at the end of it, we did that. And then I also had the TV show Dragons, Unicorns, and Other Creative Creatures.
Right. Yeah, you had some incredible.
for, by, and about artists. Creatives, actually. Creatives of any kind.
Yeah.
And I had that TV show for 2 years, huh?
Tell us some stories.
Well, you know, some of the most interesting people that I had on my radio show and on my TV show, and then I had a Facebook TV show called Laughing, Loving, and Alive. And of course, there was a time when I had both TV shows going and the radio show going. So I was doing like crazy media stuff. But my favorite stories are the stories of the people that would come in and got what I was trying to do for them, which is, you know, I would send this letter out and I would say to people, look, don't come in and just do a hard sell on whatever it is you do, whatever it is you produce, whatever it is that you're promoting, a book or whatever. Come in and show people who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And along the way, we'll make sure they check you out. We'll let them know what is it that you offer, what is it that you teach. And so when I think of some of the stories, I think of the people who maybe weren't famous, they didn't have bestsellers, they weren't celebrities. I had a few celebrities along the way at different times. Sean Khan, I don't know. I mean, there were some celebrity people here and there, but my big thing was never celebrities. It was always about people who I felt like had a story that could inspire or motivate people.
Right. Yeah.
Give people hope.
Yeah, that's people who make other people realize that it's okay to have their hopes and their dreams too. You're really good at that, you know?
Thank you. You know, I had some very seasoned guests through the years. And I had ebb and flows in all the places I went. Times when my show was hot and on a streak and booking the guest and doing the stuff and everything was easy and stuff like that. And then I had periods where I might get, for whatever reason, lost in the weeds. It's hard to say I was perfectly consistent for 20 years. That would be a lie.
For everybody.
Yeah.
You know, no perfectly consistent for 20 years. It just doesn't happen.
But I always, the people that stay with me are the people that, there was the woman who survived going from being raised in an abusive household to going to an abusive marriage, to escaping both of them, to writing a book, to starting a nonprofit, to help. In fact, I think you were on that show. I think you co-hosted that show with me. Yeah.
I believe.
I mean, yeah. She stands out to me. Some of the other people, you know, who were, I always remember Nicole Brandon. And Nicole did a few shows with me, and Nicole actually had her own TV show and she had her own radio show, and I guested on her TV show and I guested on her radio show. and she guested on my radio show, and that she was somebody who had a lot of early successes as a child and a young adult in theater and in movies and in winning pageants, and then had a crash and had to come back and had to move forward and re-put her life together and reset her priorities, and got into following a much more spiritual path. And, you know, what she could share from that. I love this guy that I had on, and I had him on for series. And I used to do series sometimes where I would have somebody that I felt like had a lot to offer and would do a little series. I think I did a series on Om Times that you were involved with, which was like with the naturopath. Is that ringing any bells?
Oh, we
could
did.
Be wrong.
I know we did a show with a naturopath. I don't know if we did a couple.
Yeah, there was a naturopath, Marion Killenbeck, Dr. Marion Killenbeck, and she did. Now I'm trying to cross over. Did she do radio shows with me and TV shows, or radio and or TV shows? But she really brought a lot of different perspectives from an alternative, somebody, you know, as a naturopathic doctor, explained a lot of stuff, gave people simple things they could do and different ways to see and do things. That always stood out to me. And I'm going to say right up front that, God, I'm looking, we haven't had a break. I'm surprised. Usually we would have had a break by now.
That's okay.
So, and I have to say, some of my favorite shows had to do with my co-hosts. You and I, we had some incredible shows where it was just you and I.
Yeah.
Talking about stuff.
Yeah.
I had some incredible shows with Matt Connerton, who has been involved with a lot of my different radio and TV shows. And from the perspective of, I really believed, and I still really do believe, that when Matt tried to give a, here is a view of politics that, here is a view of politics which didn't, which wasn't either left or right. And it got harder, obviously, once we got into MAGA land.
Right.
But I always appreciated that he could he could bring out and make people try to have better critical thinking skills around this and be less, you know, just engaged into repeating things.
Right. That is definitely one of Matt's strong suits. He has an old school reporter's way where he puts the facts out there and doesn't try to tell you how to think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was it. Some of my favorite shows were also when I was doing the regular poetry shows.
Mm.
And I think we only did, we did some of them, but I had a period where I had somebody that came on once a month regularly, and she was a poet, and we got other poets to call in, and it was back when I was living in Arizona, and I think I was on Om Times at that point, but it might have been the place I was before initially, and that it was that I got to listen to. I'm having some kind of feedback here. I got to listen to. I got to listen to other people's poetry. I got to share my poetry. We got to talk the meaning and the story behind it. And of course, as you know, my poetry is always a big deal for me.
Yeah.
As something that I want to share, and I want people to share their poetry, and being able to give artists of any kind, whether it was on the TV show or the radio show, giving artists a chance to expose, to share their art, to share their creativity, were always some of my favorite shows.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So what's the plan going forward? I mean, what are we thinking?
Well, you know, I'm going to be working on, I'm going to take some time off, and I do this every now and then. I think 2 years ago, I think I took the summer off, and Om Times was very gracious about just letting me do replays for the summer. Because every now and then, again, I got to freshen up.
Yeah.
And I've got to kind of redo things. And so I am in the process of taking a break. Like I said, you know, last year, as you know, and I made a few references occasionally on the radio show, but I had a lot of health issues last year, and I'm, you know, back in the saddle, but still kind of catching up and moving forward in that saddle. And as you know, because you also had some struggles, there's a lot of things that kind of get pushed to the wayside. And so I'm in the middle of a huge number of life changes right now. And what I want to say to people is go to the Dr. Kevin Show Facebook page. As I look to reinvent myself, and I've been making, you know, I've had several shows with Ashley Olstein on, who is going to come in and co-host with me when it's time to launch the show again. And we're kind of looking at some different formats and setting up things differently, maybe resurrecting some stuff I haven't done for a while. And I think the show is going to be a little less guest focused. There'll still be guests, but I'm kind of playing with the idea. And again, go to Facebook, put in the Dr. Kevin Show. If you have weigh-ins, especially people that have been following me for a long time, maybe have jumped venues with me, so to speak. Venue's not the right word, but it works. As I've kind of revamped and redone myself, that I'm certainly open to, hey, you know, you used to do this. Like, I used to do a quote every show.
Yeah.
That was, I think, before you. Or were you on when I did the quote thing? Because I've gone off and on it.
You did it at the beginning. But I've heard you do it, you know, before.
Yeah. When I was still back living in Phoenix, I spent time every week going through and coming up, and I kept a whole file of quotes that I felt were inspiring or motivating or thought-provoking. And I was really into trying to engage my listeners into always thinking outside the box or having a different experience with things. And so I'm moving back. And what I want to say to people is, again, go to the Facebook, the Dr. Kevin Show, make sure you like it, make sure you follow it. That's where all the announcements will come out when all the dust is settled. I'm taking a little time off, but it's not like I'm going to take the rest of the year off. Not my style, but I've got a lot of things that I want to kind of set up. So I'm in some conversations with Ashley about, what she brings to the show. Ashley.
Yes.
In fact, you were the one, when you had to step away from co-host, you were the one that said to me, you should consider Ashley. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. I just think she's got great energy. She's a good match for you.
And so if you ever wondered if I listened to you, there's your proof.
Well, thank you.
I don't know that we're going to resurrect the quote thing, though we've talked about it. I think we're going to maybe do a little astrological reminder. So we'll still have the astrology show once a month, but maybe every week we'll remind people what's going on that week, because 1 month is an awful lot of astrology to try to absorb. But maybe do a little reminder. Remember, this week, this is going into here. So, you can go back and listen to the show if you want, but just here's a little reminder. But I think I'm going to go back a little, definitely a little closer to the early me and Dara Jane days, where Ashley and I will do maybe the first 15 minutes of kind of chatting and talking about stuff, then have a guest for a half an hour, and then have 15 minutes wrap up. I don't know. What do you think about that format?
Well, I think that's a great format. That's worked really well when you and I have done it that way. So I think it works really well, because then it's not too much pressure on anybody. And you're still you guys are still the star of the show, highlighting somebody else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I really want to be, I've been interviewed on more radio shows and more TV shows than I can count. I've sat in the guest seat 1,001 times. In fact, I met you because you were co-hosting a TV show and I was a guest on it.
Yeah, well, you just kind of crashed that TV show, but I think every day it's good. You were not our scheduled guest. You just showed up and we brought you right in. And you and I hit it right off.
Yeah. Well, I had an open invitation from your co-host on that show. You just never met me to gate crash whenever I was in town, because I didn't live here at the time.
Right. Oh,
yeah.
I know. Norm told me.
Yep.
Norm
Moody.
I hope he's resting.
Oh, I'm sure he is somewhere. So, so I'm kind of, again, I'm kicking some stuff around, but I think that I originally wanted to do radio because I wanted to share my gifts and talents. And I think that at some point along the way, though I have had guests, and I started to say this before, I have had guests multiple times. Like, I can't count how many times that I've had people that were seasoned interviewees that came and said, you are one of the best interviewers I ever had. Because I would not give them the canned questions. I would not ask them what their publicist sent. I would really try to engage them into meaningful conversations that could allow the audience to fall in love with them.
Yeah.
And I have heard so many times people say that was one of the best interviews I ever had.
Nice.
And on one hand, that's great. On the other hand, I really wanted to share what I have to share with the world, and I need to build that up into a new format. There is our sound. Lorri, thank you so much. I'm sure I will see you on the new show at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to all my listeners out there and to Ohm Times, thank you so much. I truly am grateful for all the opportunity I've had here. And listeners, facebook.com/The Dr. Kevin Show. Just like it, watch it, and as news is created, you'll get it there first. Thank you, and signing off for the last show of The Dr. Kevin Show on Ohm Times. Grateful, it's been a blessing. Namaste.